In the great kingdom of Arua, where the earth was red and the skies golden at dusk, there lived a woman named Abike, a queen not only by blood but by spirit. Born into royalty and married into royalty, Abike was the first wife of Kabiyesi Akanbi, the mighty king whose name echoed beyond the hills and rivers. But titles were not what made Abike great. They called her Obirin Akoni, a strong woman. She was wise like the elders, brave like the warriors, and tender like the new yam in season. The people adored her, the women revered her, and even the gods, it was whispered, tilted their ears whenever she spoke. It was the week of Odinewe, the celebration of young children, the time when mothers are adorned in flowing shawlcate and dance towards the palace gates, bearing gifts of yams, honey, palm wine, and woven clothes. Their children, also dressed in bright wrappers, sang songs of joy. It was a time to give thanks to Oshun for fertility, peace, and grace of family. Ordinarily began as a season of joy, where laughter filled the air and mothers danced with pride. The land echoed with songs of fruitfulness. But over time, the drums that once called for celebration became to stir something deeper. The festival became a mirror, quietly revealing the silent take of those still waiting and hoping. Beneath the colors and music, many hearts bore the weight of unspoken sorrow. Certainly, not all hearts danced at Odoiwe. During the festival, there was a sacred moment set apart by the king, a moment so dear to him that none dared speak unless spoken to. It was in this time alone that King Akambi would rise from his ably craved throne, grasp the Opa Ashe, the staff of authority, and summon women who are yet to concede to rise and bow for prayers. With every measured steps, prayers poured forth like gentle rain, and with each solemn tap of his staff upon their bowed heads, they believed hope would rise again. Behind the songs and silken smiles were whispers, mocking lips that scoffed at the barren, eyes that drafted to the lecturing fingers of women not yet married, and laughter that stung like pepper in an open wound. What was meant to be sacred had slowly grown into a spectacle. The crowd grew each year as villagers from far and near came not just to pray or celebrate, but just to watch. And in the center of it all sat Abike beside her husband, the king, regal and calm. But even queens have battles of their own that no one sees. On the third night of the festival, as the moon crowned the sky in silver, a seer from the hills of Okeadon stepped into the palace unannounced. His eyes was clouded like smoke, his voice thick with mystery.
I speak of a child yet unborn, a womb chosen by the gods themselves, a queen
whose secret shall shake the foundations of Arua. The people murmured, casting curious glances at the palace wives. But no one looked at Abike, the first wife, the beloved queen whose strength was as constant as the rising sun. No one suspected that beneath her grace and radiant smile was a grief she had buried deep and worth-having silence. Even as she sat aside the king, adorned in royal beads and embroidered cloth, Abike's heart trembled, for she knew the prophecy was not just a message, rather, it was a woman. The courtyard fell silent as the seer stepped forward in his bare foot. His wrapper soaked from the journey. He carried no offering, bow, or greeting, only the calabash tied with red and black cloth, and a gallon filled with water of Oshu, the river of fertility. His voice trembled like rustling leaves.
A womb shall rise, blessed and cursed by the touch of the gods. From it shall come a child of balance, of fire and of peace. But before its cry pierces the veil, the earth shall shudder, and memory shall bleed.
The bearer of a forbidden secret will be unmasked, and the house of honor will quake beneath truths long buried.
The crowd grasped. Some clutched their wrappers tighter. Others bowed in fear. Even the king's face, usually unmoved, grew still. But Abike remained poised, lips slightly parted, her hands hidden beneath folds of royal fabric. Only those who knew her well, if any dared claim so, might have noticed her knuckles whitened, gripping the bits of her waist. That night, while the palace slept, the queen sat alone in her chamber. The incense had long died out. Only the flickering flame of the oil lamp danced across her face, revealing eyes not of fear, but of knowing. Because deep in her soul, Arika already felt the stirring not in her womb, but in the air, in her dreams, in the stillness of dawn. And though she had carried her pain with the strength of 10 women, something had shifted. Something was coming, and it would not let her hide anymore. The gods know, she murmured to herself in silence. The morning sun crept in through the silk-draped windows of Queen Abike's chamber, casting golden light on the bed she had barely slept in. Her mind had not rested, haunted by the prophecy and the weight she had carried alone for far too long. Suddenly, the stillness shattered. Our attendants burst into the room, their faces pale with terror. They did not speak at first, their mouths open, but no words came. Their hands trembled as they pointed towards the door. Before the elders could gather the courage to speak, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. And then came the voice.
Abike!
It was the unmistakable voice of King Akabi, sharp and thunderous, drawing closer. Abike's breath caught in her throat. She rose quickly, her heart thundering like a drum in her chest, as she took a few hurried steps towards the door, just as it flung open. There he stood. King Akabi's eyes blazed with fury. At his side stood the seer and 2 palace guards. Never had Queen Abike seen her husband looked at her this way, not with anger, but with disgust. For the very first time since they met, the king looked at her with utmost disappointment. The room trembled with his roar.
Abike! How dare you?
She dropped on her knees instinctively, bowing her head.
How could you do this? You, of all people, you have shamed me. You have shamed Arua.
Abike said nothing at first. She dared not look up, even as her chest rose and fell with silent sobs.
You have nothing to say.
He bellowed again. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but steady. "My king, let me explain," she said in a gentle voice. But the words only fueled his rage. "Explain what?" he snapped. "You have betrayed the crown, disgraced me, and you have even dragged your mates into this treachery." He turned sharply towards the guards.
Seize her maids. Take them to the dungeon. They knew and said nothing.
Have mercy on us.
Forgive us, we beg you.
Please, mercy.
The attendants cried out, falling to their knees and pleading for mercy. Then he turned back to Abike. His eyes, though burning with anger, still flickered with a buried love, but duty would not let him soften. "Take the queen to the isolation chamber. She is not to leave until I say otherwise. Post guards at the door. Let her be attended to, but not free. None of them is free until I decide what is to be done. He turned to leave, but just as his foot touched the threshold, a voice spoke softly behind him, calmly, resolute, and aching with quiet power. My king, Abike said, standing tall, I shall not be separated from my mates. If they had to be locked in the dungeon, so shall I be too. I share the same punishment as my handmaids. The king stopped. Slowly he turned, and in that moment, he saw her, not as a queen, not as a wife, but as a woman breaking. Tears ran down Abike's cheeks, yet her spine remained straight. Her voice did not waver. The king's heart cracked. He longed to rush to her, to hold her, to wipe away every tear. But behind him stood the seer and his chiefs. They watched, they waited. Judgment had to be made. And so he hardened his face one more time. As you wish, he said coldly. Take them all to the dungeon. And without any word, he turned and walked away, the heavy beads on his wrist clinging with each step. Queen Abike stood still, her tears now silent, her fate sealed for now. The king's footsteps faded down the corridor, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the words he had spoken. For a moment, no one moved. Then the girl stepped forward, not with force, not with anger, but with gentleness, head slightly bowed. Though they had heard the king's command, they could not bring themselves to treat Queen Abike like a criminal. She was still their Olori, their beloved queen. They approached her with quiet respect, one of them extending a hand as if to say, we're only following orders, oh, forgive us. Abike gave a faint nod, gathering what little dignity she had left at that moment. Her mate clung to her side, trembling but silent, finding courage in her composure. Slowly, the procession began down the palace corridors, past the murals that once celebrated her as the mother of the land, and into the dim stone passage that led to the dungeon beneath the palace. With each step, the weight of the prophecy, the shame of exposure, and the uncertainty of the king's final judgment pressed down like the palace roof had fallen on her shoulders. But Abigail did not cry again. She walked with her head held high, even as the doors of the dungeon groaned open. For 2 days, the palace was cloaked in a silence it had never known. The sounds of music, laughter, and celebration that once filled its courtyard during Odunewe had faded into a hushed whisper and a cautious footsteps. The servants tread lightly, and even the queens walked the halls as if afraid the walls themselves would speak. And in the heart of the royal chambers, King Akambi sat alone, his meals untouched, his robes unadorned. He had not spoken to anyone since that day. He had refused the presence of his council, turned away his chiefs, and even declined every invitation sent by his other wives. Not even the music played by the royal musicians stirred him. Not the scent of pepper soup, his favorite, placed gently at his side, moved him. Instead, he sat by the open window of his chamber, staring out at the garden where Abike once laughed, where she had once braided the hair of children and offered counsel to women with a soft and wise voice. His chest ached, but his face held firm. The weight of a kingdom rested on his shoulders, and yet nothing weighed heavier than the absence of her presence. He ran his fingers along the wooden bead she had gifted him years ago, now worn out and dulled. He remembered her smile, the way she called him Agdemi, my crown, and the quiet of the night. Now all he hears is the echoes of a voice and the distant sound of the guards keeping watch over her. She asks to be locked with her maids, he whispered to himself, eyes misted with pain. Even in disgrace, she chooses honor. He clenched his jaw, wrestling the storm within him. To the world, he was a king, but inside, he was just a man who had imprisoned the only woman who had ever truly held his heart. Sleep came slowly to Kabiesi Akambi. His body lay still, but his spirit drifted, pulled into a quiet place, not of the guards of prophecy, but of memory. He stood beneath the Udwala tree in the palace garden, the one Abike loved most. The breeze was warm, fragrant with scents of blooming flowers, and laughter floated in the air like music, his own laughter. And there she was, dressed in a soft yellow native attire, her headscarf loose, her feet bare. She sat on a woven mat, surrounded by the wives of the palace, young maidens, and children giggling as they played. But all he saw was her. She turned to him, a smile wide, her eyes teasing. Kabiesi, she called out playfully, are you just going to stand there like an oba made of stone? The others chuckled. Even the guards looked away, grinning. Akambi walked to her, pretending to frown, then knelt beside her like a common man. Ha, Abikemi, he said softly. You embarrass your king in front of the children. Then rule with laughter and love, not just law, my king. She whispered, her hand brushing his cheek. She leaned in, her forehead touching his, and for a brief moment, there was no crown, no throne, no kingdom, just two souls wrapped in sunlight and memory. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, she was gone. The Udwala tree was bare. The math is empty. The garden is silent. And he stood alone. King Akambi awoke with a quiet gasp, the cool air of the early morning brushing against his damp skin. He sat up slowly, staring out the window at the same Udala tree in the palace garden, now swaying gently under the moonlight. Abike, he mumbled, his voice hoarse. What have I done? As his name echoed through the chamber, urgent and trembling, Kabiesi! Kabiesi! He blinked, disoriented. The dream still clung to his skin like the morning dew. Abike's laughter, her touch, the soft rustle of leaves, but now it was all gone, only replaced by the worried faces of his personal guards and two palace servants kneeling at the entrance of his chamber. What is it? He asked, his voice rough. One of the guards looked at the ground as he spoke. My king, it is the queen, Oloria Bike. At once, the king sat up, the veil of sleep now torn away. What of her? She is unwell, Tabiesi. The guard swallowed hard. She fainted just before the morning drums. The maid says she has been weak since yesterday. She has not eaten nor slept. The palace healer was summoned to the dungeon at dawn, he said hurriedly.
And you left her there?
We awaited your command, Kabiesi.
She was taken to the side chamber after dawn, Kabiesi.
He turned away hurriedly. As he walked down the hallway, past the Udala 3 he had seen in his dream, looking peaceful and unmoved. But something within him had already shifted. Pain twisted in his chest. The shame he had spoken of. Was it truly hers or his? He pondered within himself. Prepare the inner court, he said, his voice low but firm. Tell the healer to report to me immediately. He paused and looked at the head guard. And take me to her, he exclaimed. In the dungeon, the servant asked surprisingly, No, in the sky, the king muttered with a look of almost striking the guard. Get out of my way and take me to her now, he ordered. The heavy door of the dungeon creaked open. The attendants froze instantly. Never in all their years had they seen or even heard of a king stepping into the dungeon. Their shock gave way to terror. They dropped instantly on the ground, their foreheads pressed to the cold floor. Kabiesio, they echoed, their voice trembling, bowing not as a prisoner, but to the man who commanded them all. The door creaked softly as King Akambi entered the inner dungeon. He said nothing. He did not move. He did not acknowledge the bowed greetings from those present. His eyes were burning with restrained fury. But beneath that, a storm of guilt churned in his chest. Each step towards her felt heavier than the last. She was there on the low bed, still, silent, barely breathing. Queen Abika lay pale and unmoving, her body thin with fever. A handmaid seated beside her, carefully dabbing her forehead with a damp cloth and whispering prayers through trembling lips. The king reached her side, and something in him suddenly collapsed. He sank to his knees beside her, not as a ruler, not as a man seeking forgiveness, but as a soul crushed by what he had become. His hand reached for hers, trembling. He wrapped his fingers around her arm, still warm but weak. His voice didn't come, only silence, only breath, only regret. He bowed his head, gripping her hand tighter, as if afraid to let her slip away again. And in that silence, he felt it, the weight of everything he had done, and everything she no longer had the strength to say. What happened to the queen? He roared, his voice tearing through the darkness as he turned to the senior midwife. She opened her mouth to speak, but before a word could escape her lips, the healer rushed in and raised his hand sharply as he saw the king. A war, he cried out. A taboo, my king. You must not be seen in this place. I do not care, the king thundered angrily, stepping forward. Get the queen out of here now, he ordered. Queen Abigail was swiftly carried from the dungeon, just as the king had commanded. She was surrounded by her attendants and other women. She was taken into the royal chamber, where care and comfort awaited her. Behind them walked the healer, just returning from a sacred meeting with Oshun, the goddess of fertility. Inside his chamber, King Akambi continued to pace like a trapped lion, the soft click of his coral beads marking each step he took. What happened down there? He demanded. Why were the guards not summoned the moment she fell ill? Why did you keep silent and leave her to sleep in that place overnight? His voice cracked with fury as he faced the maid. I swear, if anything happens to my wife, I will. Kabiesi, the healer's voice cut through the air, firm but respectful. Sit, my king. The king stopped. Slowly, he lowered himself, his chest heaving, his hunger restrained only by fear. What is wrong? He asked at last, his voice quieter now. Okbele. The healer studied him for a long moment, then spoke.
The queen shall be well. She will need much rest.
The healer spoke, his voice low and distant, for she bears more than frailty, more than illness. A harsh sound followed. Then a slow, weary breath escaped him, as though he had seen too much. Hmm, he murmured, the sound heavy with unseen truths.
Speak, Opele.
The king said, firmly but softly, the queen carries a child of destiny, my king, an heir to the throne of Arawa. Kabiesi Akambi paced his chamber like a storm bound in flesh, restless, silent, yet roaring within. His jaw was clenched, hands twitching at his sides, every breath a battle between love and fury. On the royal bed lay Queen Abike, still as a carved stone, her breath shallow beneath the heater's quiet watch. He watched her not just as a patient, but as a puzzle no medicine could solve. Kabiese longed to wake her, to demand answers, to shake truth from her lips. But Okwele's calming presence and his strange medicine held the king back like an invisible man. The king's face bore the weight of 1,000 questions, questions that burned with urgency, questions that screamed through his blood. The seer would return soon, and with him, judgment. Proof of betrayal would follow him through the palace gates. And yet, in the center of all the king's torment, one truth burned brighter than the rest. He had a son, a prince, a child marked by the gods, or even cursed by them. Joy and dread circled each other in his chest, like warriors locked in eternal combat. The coming days will shape not only his destiny, but hers as well. And he knew too well the punishment demanded for the crime for which Abike stood accused of. Suddenly, the grief could no longer be contained.
Why are the gods punishing me?
His voice broke like thunder against the chamber walls, and then he fell, hard to his knees, as if the weight of the heavens themselves had come crushing down on his shoulders. His cry echoed through the palace corridors. Guards rushed in at once, alarmed. But Okpele, the healer, raised his hands gently.
Leave him. Wait outside.
The guards obeyed the healer immediately, slipping silently from the room. Still on his knees, Kabiyesi Akombi raised his tear-streaked face to the roof. How do the gods give a blessing and a curse in the same breath? He cried out, "What have I done to deserve such torment?" Opele inhaled deeply, ready to speak, but the doors burst open. The seer entered the room, flanked by two other priests dragging a man between them. His strength was spent. His feet scraped the floor. His head hung low in shame. Kabiyesi rose slowly, his gaze hardening into steel. Disgust fled in his eyes as he lifted his staff to strike the strange man, rage building like fire. But the healer stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Not like this, my king," the healer said, gently but firmly.
Death must come. Let it come on the altar of the gods.
"Let the gods cleanse our land, but do not deny the land cleansing because of your anger, my lord." The king's fury trembled beneath his skin, but he did not strike. The seer stepped forward, his voice calm and final.
It is time, my king.
The words struck Kabiyesi like a physical blow. He stiffened his jaw. His grip tightened around his staff as his chest rose and fell sharply. For a moment, he could not move. His eyes were darkened, fixed on the floor as though the weight of the gods themselves had settled upon his shoulders. A muscle in his jaw twitched as the only sign of the storm raging within him. Then the healer stepped forward, his voice gentle but urgent. "Great one, at least allow her to speak," he said. "Let us hear the queen's side. We owe her that much." But the seer's response came cold and quick.
The gods do not make exceptions for offenders.
The king's patience was shattered. "Enough," he thundered. "Leave us." And as for him, his gaze looked at the man dumped on the floor. "Throw him into the dungeon. No food, no water." The guards obeyed. The room emptied at once, and silence returned. The king resumed his pacing, his thought unraveling like a thread caught in thorns. until from the silence came a voice, faint, soft, familiar. Ademi, she whispered. Only one voice had ever called him that. He turned swiftly. Abike was staring, weak but awake. Her eyes flooded open, and in that instant, the fury in him dissolved like salt in water. He rushed to her, helping her sit and bringing water to her lips with trembling hands. In that moment, there was no crown, there was no kingdom, only a man and a woman he once called his world. How do you feel, my queen? He whispered. Very weak, she murmured. Rest, he said. Rest a little longer, my love. But her eyes met his, full of pain and full of purpose. No, Kabiesi, I know you need answers. I can explain. But first, her voice fluttered. Where are my maids? The question struck like a blade. They are in the dungeon, he said sharply, rising to his feet, where they belong. At once, Abike slid from the bed and collapsed to her knees. Okomi, my husband, she begged through tears. You know they act only by my command. You punish them for my actions, my lord. Please, punish me instead. Kabiesi stared at her. Turn. Fury and heartbreak tangled in his chest. What have you done, Abikemi? He asked, voice thick with pain. You have placed me in an impossible position. What would you have me do? Pain and sorrow filled his eyes as he asked her. She lifted herself slowly, regaining a silver of her former grace, even in weakness. You are the king, she said, voice steady now. Do what must be done, but first hear my side. Before she could go on, the storm inside him rose again. A man was found in your chamber at night, he exploded. In my palace, under my roof. What were you thinking? Am I not enough for you? As the word left his mouth, the door burst open one more time. The seer stormed in, followed by the palace chiefs. In his hand, he held a small tattered book. He hurled it at Abike's feet. Kabiesi, the seer proclaimed, this forbidden book was found in the queen's chambers. Even while she was confined, she has brought a curse upon us all. She must be sacrificed, along with a lover, to cleanse this land. The king bent down and picked up the book. It was a Bible. His hands trembled as he stared at it. Then slowly he raised his gaze to Abike. You brought a Bible into my palace? He said, voice low and shaking. Into the house of my forefathers. You know it is a taboo. You know the consequences. He raised his hand to strike Abike. But Abike did not move, did not plead. And again, Okwele stepped between them. Kabiesi's rage roared to the surface. Okwele, he cried, I will strike you both if you do not leave me be.
You brought a Bible into this land.
The seer moved towards the king quickly, sensing disaster. My king, he said, voice urgent. Come, walk with me. The gods have spoken. I carried your message, he said, only to prevent the king from committing an atrocity. But Kabiesi's eyes never left Abike. They did not blink. They did not soften. You brought a Bible into this land, he said again. This time not a question, but a sentence, a wound. And without another word, he turned and followed the seer into the dark hall beyond the chamber. The dawn broke slowly over the kingdom of Arowa, not with golden light, but with the grey breath of the morning. The air was heavy, thick with dread. No bird sang, even the wind dared not to stir. The square of judgment, usually a place of ceremony and homage, had been transformed. and in the center is a mighty bonfire, blazed, flames writhing like spirits seeking escape. Around it stood the villagers, silent, shoulder to shoulder, their faces lit by the fire and fear. The chiefs stood beneath the carved totems of the gods, beads clacking softly with every measured breath. The seer also stood standing and watching, preserving every sacred moment of this occasion. A staff draped in white cloth, his face glowing as usual, his eyes bore no emotion, only duty. And before the shrine, bound in thick iron chains, was the man, the one found in the queen's chamber. He knelt broken, but not weeping. His head was bowed, not in guilt, but in resolve. And from the shadows emerged the Aberi, the royal executioner, a towering man, his body marked with ancient scars and scarred sigils. In his hand, he held the great blade of judgment, long, curved, forged in fire and blood. It gleamed beneath the rising sun like the fang of the gods. Drums began to beat, slow, deep, and foreboding. Boom, boom, boom. Then suddenly, the voice of the seer ran through the square like prophecy.
By the laws of our fathers, by the shrines of our ancestors of the gods,
By the silence of the gods, this man shall be beheaded before the altar. His body shall be burned, and his ashes given to the queen.
Who shall drink, that her womb may be purged of the curse?
The villagers murmured, uneasy.
If the gods are appeased, she shall be banished. If they are not, she shall be killed, and her name erased from the earth.
From the hallway was Kabiesi Akobi, his queens, and his inner chiefs walking into the sacred ceremony, drums and eulogy blazing at the entrance of the king. He sat on his throne. Beside him were his chiefs and his other wives. His eyes were empty pools, unreadable, unblinking. The weight of the kingship rested on his shoulders like a mountain of iron. He said nothing since the seer brought him the God's decree. He only nodded when asked about anything. His lips had not moved since. And then the Aberi, the executioner, stepped forward. Each footstep felt like a thunderclap. He lifted the great blade. The flames flickered in its reflection. The prisoner bowed his head lower. The square held its breath. Then a scream tore through the silence. Stop! All heads turned. From the far end of the square, Queen Abike burst forth like a spirit from the underworld. Her garment clung to her thin frame. Her feet were bare. Her steps were firm from confidence. But her eyes burned with fire. Don't kill him, my king, she cried, her voice echoing across stone and soul. She ran past the guards, past the flames, past the shocked priest, and dropped to her knees behind the chained man, wrapping her arms around him. Her body trembled. Her hands rose in surrender. Her tears fell freely onto the dust.
He is not my lover. He is my brother.
A sudden gasp swept through the square like a whirlwind. The drums stopped. Even the fire seemed to freeze. Kabiesi rose suddenly from his throne and took a step forward, his chest rising with confusion and fury. The chiefs exchanged troubled glances. Even the seer's brow darkened. But Abika did not stop. She turned towards the king, kneeling still in the dust before him. Okomi, my husband. She bowed her head.
Let them search our blood. Let them cut my veins if I lie.
The wind stirred. The flames rose again, higher this time. Kabiesi's lips parted, but no words came. He looked to the seer standing beside him. Even the seer's jaw tightened, but his eyes flickered with uncertainty. And in that moment, Time held its breath. Would blood flow? Would mercy rise? Will the gods accept this truth or demand more? Only the king could decide. The chamber was dim, lit only by the glow of a single oil lamp, incense burned low in the corner, its smoke curling like the remnant of a fading storm. Kabiyesi Akanbi stood by the window, staring out into the darkened courtyard. His crown sat on the edge of the table, untouched, unwanted. The weight on his head had shifted to his heart. Behind him, Queen Abike sat weak on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. There were no guards, no seer, no judgment, only two people, a man and a woman, bound by love, but broken by secret. And at last, she spoke.
His name is Dorotimi.
She said softly.
He is my brother. My father's first wife bore him in secret, a union the royal house forbade. When they found out, they banished him. They said he was cursed, said he would bring shame to the bloodline. He was a child, Kabiyesi, a boy. But they sent him away like a thief. They called him an abomination. He was taken far across the sea, to a place called England. He found God there. He found the Messiah. I did not know for years. And while he lived, I suffered. You know I have been mocked, but you do not know how. I have heard women laugh when I pass, whisper when I walk. They have placed charms under my door. They have spat behind me at the stream. Old women cross their arms and say, "She is the barren queen." They say I sit on a throne my womb cannot match. One day, a woman from the market followed me into the palace grounds. She dropped a calabash at my feet and said,
"Maybe this one will do what your womb cannot."
I am a warrior queen, Kabiyesi. I have faced men in battle. I have held bloodied swords and buried my soldiers with my own hands. But I could not fight this. I was breaking my king. I was about to give up when he came. Dorotimi. He came not in riches, not with soldiers, but with one book, the Bible. He came and held my hand and said, "Abike, God has not forgotten you." He told me of Jesus, the man who healed the woman with the issue of blood, who gave Sarah a son in her old age, who answered Hannah's cry. I wept that night. For the first time, I believed, truly believed, that this shame could be broken. We fasted. We prayed, I and my handmaids. And then one day, we gave our lives to Christ. We were saved that night, Kabiyesi. And we are free. That is why he comes into my chamber every night. Not for sin, but for communion for myself and my handmaids. He broke the bread, and we drank wine. And in that moment, where the world saw shame, God gave us grace. I know what I have done. I broke the law of the land. But I could not ignore the calling of the Lord.
Silence filled the room. The lamp flamed, trembled. Kabiyesi stared at the book in his hands. A book his ancestors had rejected. A book the law had outlawed. A book that had somehow now brought life. And in that moment, he did not know what he feared more. The shame of what had happened, or the power of what might now be. A profound stillness descended in the king's chamber after Abike's revelation, heavy and absolute. The gentle crackle of the oil lamp punctuated the quiet, as the very air itself seems to hold its breath. Kabiyesi Akanbi sat on the chair, alone in his chamber for so long, staring at the Bible still resting in his lap, the forbidden book now burning like fire in his hands. He stared at it, unmoving, as though it might begin to speak for itself. Then suddenly, he jumped to his feet, as if something had beaten him or woken him up to reality. He rushed into the room where Abike was laying, and his voice, when it came, was not quiet. "You brought the gods of the white man into my palace," he said, his voice cold but rising, "into the house of my forefathers without my knowledge." Abigail did not speak. She sat still, though trembled, her eyes never leaving his face. "You invited spirit our ancestors cast out centuries ago," he continued. "You held communion in my chambers. You allowed a man, your brother or not, to enter the queen's chamber at night." He slammed the Bible onto the table. "The law does not seek for reasons, Abike," he shouted. "The gods do not ask for context." His fists were clenched, his breathing uneven, but behind the fury was something else: fear. His eyes darted to the Bible again, as though it might strike him where he stood. "What if they curse this house?" he muttered, voice low now. "What if they silence the rain or turn our wombs to dust? Have you thought of that?" He began pacing. "Do you know how many kings died trying to uproot the gods of our land? Do you know what it took to seal the covenant of this kingdom? Blood, sacrifice, silence." He stopped and turned sharply to her face. "And now you have brought another god into the very land we offer libation." Abike took a step forward, voice calm but trembling. "And what has that God done?" she asked softly. "What kind of God demands silence from the broken? But this new God has given me unimaginable peace. He has wiped away my secret tears, my king. He has given me the joy of being called a mother. And he has also given your son a chance at life, Tabiesi."
Don't speak of the boy. Don't bring him into this.
Abike did not back down.
But it's all connected. The shame.
The curse, the blood on our doors. This is not just about me, Kabiesi. This is about what the gods could not do and what Christ did. A muscle twitched in the king's jaw. He looked at her for a long moment, then looked away. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. "Leave." Abike's eyes widened. "Okomi, I said leave." He pointed to the door. "Before I say something I cannot take back." She hesitated. Then slowly, with tears in her eyes, she turned and walked to the door. But before stepping out, she looked over her shoulder. "You asked, what if the gods curse your house? But what if Christ came to save it?" And then she was gone. Kabiesi stood alone in the quiet. The Bible sat before him. The flames of the lamp danced wildly, as though the room itself trembled at what had just been spoken. The days that followed Queen Abike's revelation arrived like a slow curse. Unseen, but deeply felt. No trumpet blew, no war was declared, and yet the kingdom of Arua found itself standing on a trembling edge. It began with silence. The wind that once carried the laughter of children now whispered only dust. The streams ran thick and brown. Fish floated lifeless on the surface of the streams. The ground that was once warm and generous turned hard beneath the farmer's feet. Seeds refused to rise. Even fruits withered on the branch before its time. In the market square, a woman pulled back a cloth from her basket and suddenly gasped. Her plantains had rotted overnight. Even at the river, two girls fetching water screamed suddenly when they found a dead goat bobbing in the muck. Then came the birthing. Pregnant women miscarried. Livestock all gave birth to stillborn. Even the hens forgot how to lay. The people did not speak it out loud. Not at first, but their eyes said what their mouths feared. This is punishment. The gods are really angry with us. The queen has suddenly brought a strange spirit into the land. After much murmuring between themselves, they all turned to the shrine to appease the gods. The seer burned several offerings day and night. He poured oil, cracked bones, sprinkled feathers, and sang songs for the gods. But the gods did not answer. He summoned 3 cows for sacrifice. Still, the rain refused to fall. He shouted at the idols, his voice echoing inside the empty shrine.
Do not abandon us now. They are doubting you. Eh? They are doubting me.
But there was no voice, no fire, no sign, only stillness. Even the voice of the gods have gone silent. In the palace, Kabiyesi Akambe walked the halls like a man hunted. His crown no longer sat proudly upon his head, but sat on the corner collecting dust. He did not summon Abike. He could not, but her words were everywhere. They clung to the corners of his chambers like incense that refused to clear. They echoed in his ears each time he blinked.
What kind of God demands silence from the broken? What if Christ came to save your house?
Those words kept ringing in his head. He said it over and over and over again as he walked the hallways of the palace. And then one night, he dreamt.
It began with darkness. Not night, not even shadow. This was a living darkness. It was thick, like oil, pressing in from every side.
There was no ground beneath him, no sky above. He stood in nothing.
Then he saw them, Cairn, the idols, the ones he had bowed to since boyhood.
But now, they moved. They came closer, towering.
You built your house on our silence. You gave us blood.
And in return, we took your soul. You belong to us.
Kabiyesi tried to speak. No sound came. He tried to run, but the ground was gone. The idols circled him, whispering, hissing, and laughing. One of them reached for him with a hand made of nice.
And then, sir, a light. A blinding, impossible light broke through the blackness.
And from the light came a presence, quiet, steady, compassionate.
And in his hands were scars. Kabiyesi fell to his knees.
Who are you?
He whispered, his voice trembling. The strange voice responded, not loud. I am the I am. The darkness fled just as the strange voice spoke. Then suddenly, Kabiyesi saw her behind him, Abike, looking radiant, restored, smiling. In her arms, she carried a child glowing like fire wrapped in peace. A boy, theirs, whole and breathing. And just as Kabiyesi reached towards them, the vision dissolved and he found himself awake. The king lay still on his bed, believing the dream. He was drenched in his own sweat. His breath caught in his throat. The moonlight slipped through the carved window panels, casting gentle silver onto the floor. And for the very first time in his reign, perhaps in his life, the king whispered words not to the gods of his ancestors, but to the one who came into his dream. If you are the I am,
Then show me, teach me, forgive me.
Then suddenly, from the outside, the wind stirred, and far off in the distance, thunder rumbled, but not the thunder of judgment. It was a sound of something new breaking into the world. Kabiyesi did not speak of his dreams, not to the chiefs, not to the seer, not even to himself. But by morning, the kingdom knew something had changed. The drought had reached its breaking point. 3 days had passed without water in the stream. Children cried through the night. Old men sat outside their hut, staring at the sky as if it had betrayed them. So the seer called for a final gathering to the great shrine. If the gods were to answer, it would be now. The entire village gathered before the altar, men and women, young and old, chiefs and warriors. The idols stood tall as they had always, darkened by years of blood and smoke. The great sacrifice pit lay open. Firewoods were stacked high. Kabiyesi arrives late. No crown, no staff, just the weight of a king who had seen too much. The seer stepped forward, his voice loud and confident, though his eyes betrayed him. He lifted his staff. Chants rose, drums beat, blood was poured, the fire was lit, and then nothing. No wind, no sign, no voice. The fire sputtered. The villagers murmured within themselves, expecting to see a sign from the gods. The seer continued his incantations, louder now, sweat pouring down his face. He called the names of the gods one by one: gods of the rain, gods of the earth, gods of fertility. Still nothing. Then something happened. A crack echoed through the square. One of the idols, the oldest, the most feared, split down the middle. Stone crumbled. Dust rose. The crowd gasped. The seer stepped back, and then the sky changed. Not slowly, not gently. The cloud gathered itself in the sky as if summoned by an unseen hand. Thunder began to roar, not violent, but deep and commanding. And then suddenly, drops of water started pouring from the sky. The rain began to fall, not drops, but heavy rain, living, restoring. It poured onto the square, soaking the people, the shrine, and the idol. The fire pit flooded, blood washed away into the earth. Women began to scream, not in fear, but in shock. The children began to laugh. The rain did not destroy the people, it cleansed the land. Kabiesi stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it carried weight. The seer turned towards him, shaking.
You called them. They did not answer. But he did.
Silence fell at the words of the king. Even the drums stopped. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, holding a child who had not spoken since birth. She fell on her knees, crying out, not to the gods, but to the sky. And in that downpour, the child spoke one word: Mother. The seer dropped his staff. Kapiesi looked up to the sky as he closed his eye, letting the rain shower his face. The clouds parted, sunlight broke through, landing directly on the shattered shrine. And in that moment, the people understood something they could not explain. The gods they had feared had never protected them, they had only demanded from them. But this power, it gave life. Kabiesi turned to the people. His voice trembled, not with fear, but truth. I dreamt, he said, and now I have seen.
Bring out the queen. Bring out the queen.
The rain had washed the dust from the land, but not from the hearts of the people. They stood in the square, soaked, shaking and silent, staring at the broken shrine, the shattered idol, the mud where blood once flowed. And then she came out, Queen Abike walked into the square slowly. No guards around her, no crown on her head. Her steps were steady, her face calm, not the face of a woman returning to beg, but one returning to testify. The chiefs made way for her as she walked with confidence into the courtyard. She looked at the idols one last time, at the stones her people had feared for generations. Then she raised her voice.
I forgive you,
She said, not to the people, but to the idols themselves.
I release this land from the fear you fed on.
She turned to the crowd.
These gods demanded our silence. They fed on our blood.
They mocked our pain. Today, they have shown themselves for what they are, empty. But the God who found me in my shame, the God who gave me peace when no altar could, He is alive.
A murmur spread, not of rebellion, but of awakening. The seer stood apart from the crowd, trembling. The rainwater still clung to his robes. His staff lay broken at his feet. His mouth opened, but no words came. That night, while the village slept, the seer did not. He returned alone to the ruins of the shrine. He fell to his knees among the broken stones and whispered,
If you are real, show me.
and he did. Not in fire, not in terror, but in light. The same light Kabiesi had seen. It surrounded him, warm, piercing, and merciful. His glowing eyes the gods had caused to instill fear suddenly stopped glowing, and a voice spoke, not accusing, but calm and solemn.
You have led many in fear, but I have come to set all of you free.
The seer wept, not as a priest, but as a man whose eyes had finally opened. By morning, he was no longer standing with the idols, he stood with the people. Kabiesi stepped forward into the courtyard in front of the people, and for the very first time, he removed his crown before them.
My fathers served these gods, and they handed them to me.
He gestured to the broken idols.
But today, they did not answer.
He turned towards Abike.
The God who answered you has answered us all.
He dropped to his knees, and when the king knelt, all the people also knelt down, and the land held its breath. Dorotimi stepped forward, the banished son, the forgotten brother, now standing in the open sunlight of his homeland. He lifted the Bible high, not in defiance, but in invitation.
This God does not ask for blood. He gave his own. If your heart is tired, if your soul is heavy, if you want freedom, not fear, then come.
People stepped forward, first one, then another, then hundreds, and together, the king, the queen, chiefs, and villagers, they raised their voices. Dorotimi spoke slowly, and the people repeated after him.
Lord Jesus.
Lord Jesus,
I come before you today.
I come before you today
In total surrender. I am a sinner, and I need your forgiveness. I believe that you died for my sins and rose again. I turn away from my old ways and my false gods. I invite you into my heart to be my Lord and my Savior. From today, I choose you and you alone. Thank you for saving me. In Jesus' name, amen.
The king reigns victorious.
We celebrate our king and queen.
shrines were dismantled, not in anger, but in peace. The river ran clear again. Children laughed freely. Songs rose, not of fear, but of hope. And in the palace, Abike gave birth to a son, not born of shame, but of promise.
And so the land learned a truth it would never forget. The gods of stone demanded everything and gave
nothing. But the one true God gave himself. And in giving himself gave us life.